Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. I can see some of you. All right. Hi. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I run an organization called Encephalon. And basically, we teach the neuroscience and the biology of personal change and transformation. And we've discovered that when people change, their life changes, whether it's related to their health, or some vision or dream they have of their future, or even having moments where they transcend this physical reality and have mystical experiences. And so I've been partnering with the University of California, San Diego since 2020, and I've been doing my own independent research since 2012 in studying the neuroscience and the biology of change. And I want to talk to you about some of the insights that we've discovered, because most of you in this audience probably believe in some measure that you have some hand in your destiny, that your thoughts in some way, or the way you have a spiritual practice, you're doing that to produce some effect in your life. So many of you believe that, and when I started doing this work, people started asking me, okay, so if I believe that I have some hand in creating the life that I would desire and reaching my dreams and goals, then how do you do it? That was a really important question that people asked, and I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And if my personality creates my personal reality, and my personality is made up of how I think, how I act, and how I feel. If I want to create a new personal reality and I have to change my personality, why is it so hard to change? So the concepts of application now and personalization became way more interesting for people. They wanted to learn how to do it. So we started teaching events and workshops around the world, and we started seeing changes in people's health during an event, during a weekend workshop, and that was the impetus for me to begin to take measurements. And we've measured over 18,000 brains and over 20,000 hearts, and we've measured the microbiome, we've measured the blood in novice and advanced meditators, and thousands of factors in that blood. We've looked at gene expression, immune regulation, telomere lengths. We've studied urine, we've studied tears, we've studied breast milk. We've studied just about everything in demystifying that process of change. So today I want to talk to you about just 4 simple concepts that may help you in some measure and in some way in your life. And the first one is that your personality creates your personal reality. And I want to talk to you about how you can change your personality and see the effects in your life. I want to talk to you about what it means to change and why is it so hard to change, and give you some tools and principles for you to practice change. I want to talk to you about if we are truly creators and that we do have a hand in our life. When we're living in stress and we're living in survival and our brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis, in that state of survival, it's not a time to create. It's a time to run, fight, and hide. And I want to talk to you about how to convert from that primitive system that's built into our biology, that state of survival, into a state of creation. I want to talk to you about the information we've discovered about that entire process. What is the creative process and how do you do it? And lastly, I want to talk to you about moving out of that state of disorder and coherence and dysregulation, and some of the tools we've discovered in changing the way your brain works, to work more efficiently, to work more holistically, and also how to get that heart of ours open again, because if we're going to believe in that future that we're imagining with all of our heart, it has to literally be open and activated. And we've spent a lot of time studying the process of how to do that and how to sustain that state. And what it means when you're living by the emotions of your future before that happens, we're less prone to look for it. And the heart is the creative center, and it works really intimately with the brain when we get those two systems in order. And we discovered a formula that takes people right to that door of possibilities, that door of creation. And the more relaxed they get in their heart, the more their heart begins to relax and open, the more the heart informs the brain to be creative. That's exactly what we discovered. And the heart sends a signal to the brain, and the brain moves into these elegant states where we're seeing more in pictures and images. And the more you can do that and sustain that state, the more the brain moves into states of coherence and order, and the standing waves of coherence in the brain cause resonance, and the brain starts carrying waves upon waves. The basic brain waves, slower brain waves, or harmonics that are producing faster brain waves, all the way up into very high states of a superconscious gamma brainwave state. And I want to talk to you about how to regulate your brain waves to get beyond your analytical mind and rewrite a program and begin to get into that operating system and rehearse a new way of being. We've discovered really that when people change, their health changes. We've seen numerous examples of their life changing. We've seen them heal from the past and start to dream about a new future. And we've seen all kinds of wonderful, wonderful changes in people's lives, and even transcendental moments that cause them to question what they're really seeing is the extent of what reality is. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of these things. I want to chat with you for a bit, and then after I get all of this information out to you, then I'm going to show you some slides, and we'll just kind of reinforce and talk about everything that we learned so that you can see it in a different way. So I believe that knowledge is the precursor to experience. The more knowledge you have, the more you are prepared to try out a new experience. And so in the work that we do, we teach people sound scientific information. And we believe that science is the contemporary language of mysticism. Yeah. Science is what demystifies the mystical. And we also discover that when people talk in terms of religion or culture or tradition or even spirituality, the audience or the community becomes divided because their experience of that information is differently based on a belief or whatever. But if you give them quantum physics and Newtonian physics and neuroscience and neuroplasticity and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics and electromagnetism, if you give people new information, and if they're really, really present and paying attention with that information, they're going to learn that information, and they're going to begin to forge new connections in their brain. That learning is making new synaptic connections, and just an hour of focused concentration on a concept or an idea. The Nobel Prize laureate Kendall found out that you could actually double the number of connections in your brain if you're paying attention to new information. So there's physical evidence in your brain as a result of your interaction with the environment. But he said if you don't review that information, if you don't think about it, if you don't repeat it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining that information. So when we work with communities at events, we give them that information, and that knowledge begins to cause their brain, as they add new stitches into the three-dimensional tapestry of their neural architecture, they begin to think differently. They make their brain fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. Mind is the brain in action. Mind is the brain at work. So they're firing in new sequences and new patterns, and the process of doing that, the firing and wiring and learning the information and then giving themselves the opportunity to teach it back to somebody. It's so important to teach it back because it's easier to forget this information than to remember it. So we discovered in our events, if we give people that information and they're learning that information and they're creating a new level of mind, they got to repeat it, they got to review it, they got to think about it. So we have people literally teach what they've learned back to someone next to them. And if they can't explain it, it's not wired in their brain. But if they could actually explain what they're learning, and they're reminding themselves of all that information, nerve cells that fire together, wire together. And they begin to install the neurological hardware in preparation for that experience, the application for the experience. And if nothing is left to conjecture, if nothing is left to superstition, if nothing is left to dogma, and the person understands exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how will become easier, and they'll assign meaning to the task. And when they assign meaning to the task, they switch on their prefrontal cortex, and that's the boss, the CEO, the symphony leader of the brain, and the frontal lobe wants an outcome. And it gets very clear on its intention for that outcome. And that's when they begin to experience the event in their lives. That's when the frontal lobe says, I'm focused on this goal, this dream, this desire. So if I could set up the conditions in the environment and give people the proper instructions, if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, if they can get their actions equal to their thoughts, if they can get their mind and body working together, because they're going to apply that information, they're going to personalize it, they're going to demonstrate it, they're going to do something with it, they're going to initiate it, so that if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions and their actions equal to their thoughts and their mind and body working together, in fact, they will have a new experience. New experience then enriches the circuits philosophically in the brain. And now all of a sudden, when those jungles of neurons from the experience begin to hit the brain and they fire into networks, the moment they string into place, another part of the brain makes a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. So when you feel abundant from the experience, when you feel grateful for the experience, where you feel unlimited from the experience, you feel more whole from the experience, now you're teaching your body emotionally to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experiences for the body. Now that person's embodying the truth of that information. The information's no longer in the brain. Now the information now is chemically signaling the body. And we're understanding the truth of that philosophy, that theory, that knowledge, that information. And the chemical variation in the emotion, the new emotion from the experience, is new information. And that information is actually what begins to select and instruct genes, and genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and function of the body, and the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So all of a sudden, they begin to change their biology by chemically instructing their body to understand what their mind is intellectually understood through experience. And so now, if you've done it once, it means then on some level you have to be able to do it again. And we discovered that if people can replicate an experience, if they can repeat the experience, they'll begin to neurologically and neurochemically condition their mind and body to begin to work as one. In fact, they've done it so many times and repeated the experience so many times that the body now knows how to do it better than the conscious mind. And now it's innate in you. It's automatic, it's easy, it's familiar. You've begun to master that knowledge. You've become that philosophy. And that's the moment that we begin to move into a new state of being. And so going from philosopher to initiate to master, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, from mind to body to soul, from thinking to doing to being, to learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, and knowing it by heart, to believe, to behave, and become, is the formula for change. And we come with 3 brains that allow us to actually do that. And so if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, and 90% of our thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. If you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then I assert that you're left with the memories of the past, because that same thought is a memory from a past experience. The same thought then leads to the same choice in our life. The same choice leads to the same behavior. The same behavior creates the same experience. And the same experience produces the very same feeling and the very same emotion. And that same feeling and emotion begins to influence our very same thoughts. And our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression stay the same because we're staying the same. And so there's a principle in neuroscience that says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. Keep thinking the same thoughts, which is 90% of the time. Fire and wire those thoughts over and over again. Keep making the same choices. Keep doing the same things. The same habits become automatic programs that are neurologically wired in our brain. Keep reproducing the same experiences that stamp the same networks of neurons into the same patterns, all for the familiar feeling that we crave on a regular basis to reaffirm our identity. Do that over and over again, and by the time we're in the middle of our life, 95% of who we are is a set of automatic, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions, unconscious habits and behaviors, and automatic emotional responses to the people, circumstances, conditions, or even the thoughts in our own mind that give the body that same familiar emotion. 95% of who we are is a set of unconscious programs. So then how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. So the present personality who's listening to this stream has created the present personal reality called your life. Well, it stands to reason then, if you wanted to create a new personal reality, you would have to change your personality. In other words, if you wanted your life to change, you would have to change. And nothing changes in our life until we change. So we discovered that in order for a person to change, they have to become so conscious of their unconscious thoughts and memories that are connected to that old personality that they would not go unconscious to those thoughts in their waking day. Now, what are some of those thoughts? I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, I'll never heal, I'll never reach my dreams, there's something wrong with me, it's my mother's fault. Those are the thoughts that are happening behind the scenes of most people's awareness, that they actually accept, believe, and surrender without any analysis to be the truth. And that's what's programming their biology to be the same. The moment they begin to notice how they have been acting and how they've been speaking, and they no longer want to blame or complain or make excuses and feel sorry for themselves, or judge other people or gossip, those are the programs that the person who truly wants to change to heal has to come up against and begin to become so conscious of their unconscious habits that they would not default and go back to behaving the same way. And feelings and emotions are the record of the past. And the stronger the emotion that we feel from some experience in our life, the more altered we are inside of ourselves from some external event. The change in our chemistry through that emotion, the heightened and elevated emotional state, causes the body to narrow its focus and pay attention to the cause of that, and the brain freezes a frame. And that's called the snapshot. And so that snapshot is a long-term memory. So then the person keeps rethinking about the experience. They keep remembering it over and over again. And they're reproducing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was actually occurring. So 50 to 100 times a day, they're thinking about that problem, that past experience, that trauma. And that thought and that feeling and that image and that emotion That stimulus and response is conditioning the body emotionally into the past. And so then the body now clings to the familiar feeling, even if it's suffering, it's victimization, it's pain, and that feeling becomes so normal for most people that they just think that's the way they feel. And so till there's crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss or betrayal, the person spends the majority of their life living in a certain state of mind and body in an unconscious state. So the first step to change is to become so conscious of your unconscious self that you don't go unconscious to it again. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That literally is the moment of change. And so most people try to create a new person or reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. We literally have to become someone else. So then, how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That is the moment of change. So the person who's healed themselves of all kinds of health conditions in our community, and very serious chronic health conditions, they were doing this work. As an example, we use meditation as the model to change. They were doing their meditations not to heal. They were doing their meditations to change. And when they changed, they would heal. So then, that same thinking, that same acting, that same feeling by the time we're 35 years old is the 95% of how we live in an automatic state of mind and body. So then it would make sense then if you got new information and you wired that information in your brain, you learn the information, and then from understanding that information really well, understanding the what and the why, and we've discovered this to be the absolute truth, in 7 days people can change, completely change. Learn that information, wire it in their brain, make it really reasonable to them, have them build those models of understanding, and now they understand the philosophy, the theory, they got to act on it, so they got to make a different choice. And if they make a different choice, they're going to do a different thing and behave in a different way. If they can begin to behave in a different way, they can create a new experience. And the new experience can produce a new feeling and a new emotion. And they can actually begin to change their personality, to change the way they think, to change the way they act, and to change the way they feel. And that's really important if you're going to go from the old self to the new self. So the new personality that's emerging when a person goes, I'm going to stop being a certain way and think a certain way and act a certain way and feel a certain way. I'm going to start to think a different way, act a different way, and feel a different way. That in the end of 7 days, people's biology can completely change. And so personality, creating the personal reality, that is the first model. I want to talk extensively about that when we get to the PowerPoint presentation, but I do want you to understand that going from the old self to the new self is a lot easier said than done, because the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. You're not going to be able to predict the next moment. Now, if the body has been conditioned to be the mind emotionally, the moment you decide to make a different choice and you feel uncomfortable, if the body's the mind, the servant's the master. And this is where the body starts influencing the mind to return back to the same personality. That's when you say, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to blame, I'm not going to make excuses, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself, I'm not going to think this way, I'm not going to feel these emotions, I'm going to change my state. And the first couple hours goes really well. And then just like craving any chemical that you're addicted to, the body's having cravings from those familiar emotions. So it begins to influence the mind by having the same thoughts that say you can't, give up, it's too hard, just go automatically judge, make the same choice, do the same thing, create the same experience, feel the same emotion, and return back to the same self. Crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self is the neurological, it is the biological, it is the chemical, it is the hormonal, it is the genetic death of the old self. And so going from the old self, crossing that river of change is stepping into the unknown. And some people would rather cling to their familiar emotions and habits and hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions than to take a chance and possibility, because the unknown for most people is a scary place. But it makes sense then that crossing that river of change for a person who's healing, they would say, if a belief is just a thought I keep thinking over and over again, and I believe that I can heal because that's how I've been thinking, if I wanted to actually believe that I could think differently and believe in a different outcome, the more knowledge I have about it as a possibility, the more I think about it, the more that I believe that I can. Nerve cells that fire together wire together. And if a person says, how do I want to think and how do I remember I want to think? If they keep thinking that thought with intention and with attention and understanding that they're firing and wiring new circuits in their brain, if they keep doing that over and over again, they begin to install the neurological hardware. Repeat it enough times, and all of a sudden, that hardware becomes more like a software program, and that's the new voice in your head. That's the new belief that you're installing into your brain. Many people that do this work to heal or change something in their life, they're doing the work many times to change their belief. That means that they have to believe in something else than the diagnosis or the normal projection of a health condition. They have to actually believe that they can heal. And so it's a practice to get that information wired in the brain. It makes sense then, if you're going to truly begin to change, you got to behave differently. If you wanted to be a happy person, and if you wanted to be a healthy person, complaining and blaming and making excuses and judging other people is not going to make you feel happy. That's going to make you feel something else. All right, so then I'm going to have to begin to behave differently. How am I going to behave with my family, with my coworkers? How am I going to behave with my children, my partner? The act of closing your eyes and thinking about or mentally rehearsing what you're going to do in your life, the act of planning your behaviors, if it's done really well, the brain does not know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. The act of rehearsing mentally how you're going to be in your life is installing the circuits for you to use when you get in your life. What piece of knowledge can I apply to this experience to evolve it? And as you begin to rehearse it in your mind and plan your behavior, when the brain is truly present, the thought that you're thinking literally is the experience, and you begin to install neurological hardware in your brain. Keep doing it over and over again. That becomes a software program, and you automatically begin to behave that way. And people who healed said, I can't behave in the same way around my ex, around my coworker, because if I keep behaving the same way based on the past, I'm going to keep creating the same experience, and I'm going to keep feeling the same emotion of resentment, of aggression or anger or frustration or whatever the emotion, hatred. And it's the emotion, literally, their response to that person or circumstance, that is actually signaling the same gene that's keeping them in the same health condition. They say to themselves, this emotion isn't loving to me. I'm going to change my emotional state. So then they say, okay, let me practice feeling this new emotion. I got to feel this great gratitude. I got to feel more whole. I got to feel more vital. I got to feel more unlimited. I got to feel more free. I got to have more love for my life. They start thinking, okay, these emotions, these elevated emotions that I could feel, I'm going to feel these emotions, and I'm going to keep remember feeling these emotions. I'm going to keep bringing it up so I can remember them whenever I want. And so then it's a scientific fact that there is influence from the environment that signals the gene. In other words, it's not genes that create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates the disease. The stress hormones downregulate genes and create disease. And if we spend the majority of our time living in the state of anger and resentment and hatred and frustration, it's those very chemicals derived from the hormones of stress that are beginning to program the body into a state of disease and disorder. We discovered elevated emotions like gratitude and appreciation and kindness and care and love literally signal new genes. Because if the environment signals the gene, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, if you're living by the same similar familiar emotion every single day, you're signaling the same gene. Change your emotional state, and your body's so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the experience that's creating that emotion that's signaling the gene and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone that's signaling the gene. The person began to realize that they can downregulate the gene for a certain health condition because they understood it, and upregulate a new gene for health and wholeness and balance. And that's exactly what they did. Keep thinking differently, keep acting differently, keep feeling differently. You're changing your personality. And when you change your personality, you change your personal reality. And many people who healed from a health condition, so many times when I ask them, where did that health condition go? They say, it belonged to the other person, the old personality. I'm literally someone else. So when we started partnering with the University of California, San Diego, the scientific team that was there was very skeptical about any outcomes that they thought that they said that would see. So I took out a napkin. We were sitting at a dinner, and I wrote down same thoughts, same choices, same behaviors, same experiences, same emotions. Drew a thing and wrote same biology. Would you guys agree to that? They said yes. Okay. New thoughts, learn that new information, wired in the brain. That information causes people to think differently. They become aware of possibilities they were unaware of before. That's what knowledge does. When you become aware of another possibility, you're changing consciousness, and you can't change consciousness without changing energy. When you become aware of another possibility, there's an excitement that it could actually happen. That's a change in energy. Have them learn new information. Have them make different choices, have them do different things, have them create different experiences, have them feel different emotions. Will their biology change in 7 days? Theoretically, is it possible? And they said yes. And so we shook hands and we started this journey. And what we found out was that in 7 days, people's biology looked like that they were living literally in a new life, and not just a small percentage of them. The majority of people that were in the process of internal change, it started to be reflected in their biology, in their brains. They made their brains work better. They made their hearts work better. There were thousands and thousands of metabolites in their blood that were upregulated to suggest that they were living in a new environment. There were thousands and thousands of metabolites in their biology that prevented viruses from entering the cell, even spike viruses. There's information in that blood that took the energy out of cancer cells, that downregulated the gene for Alzheimer's disease, produced endogenous opiates naturally in the blood, changed the microbiome, changed so many different gene expressions. We saw so many changes in 7 days as a result of a person changing from one state of mind and body to another state of mind and body. So crossing that river of change and going from the old self to the new self, this is uncomfortable. And if you decide to make a different choice and do something different, get ready, because you're stepping into that river of change, and it is uncomfortable. And if the body's been conditioned to be the mind, as I said, it's going to begin to influence the mind to think the same way, to make the same choice, to do the same thing, create the same experience, to feel the same emotion. The person says, this feels right to me. No, that feels familiar to you. That's the person returning back to the same self. So then, if it's changing from one state of mind and body to another state of mind and body, going from one personality to another personality, why is it so hard to change? And I think this is a really good question, because this was what people started to ask me early on when I started this journey. They understood the philosophy. They understood, okay, if I'm going to change my personality to change my personal reality, why the heck is it so hard to change? And so think about this. I want to talk to you about what change means, define it really simply so you can begin the process. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. Your brain is a reflection of your environment. It's a memory bank of the autobiographical self. Everything you learned and experienced is wired in your brain, in your thinking neocortex. If most people wake up in the morning, and the moment they wake up in the morning, the first thing they do is they think about their problems. And those problems that are memories that are etched in the brain, that are connected to certain people or certain objects or certain things at certain times and places, the moment they remember their problems, are they thinking in the future or are they thinking in the past? It makes sense then that they would be thinking in the past. And if you believe that your thoughts have anything to do with your destiny, and the first thoughts you're thinking in your day are based on the past, it's entirely possible that your future is going to look a lot like your past. So most people wake up in the morning and they think about their problems, and those problems are connected to all the objects and things and people at certain times and places. They're thinking in the past. Every one of those problems and things that they're thinking about has a feeling or an emotion associated with it. The moment they feel unhappy, the moment they feel fear or anxiety, the moment they feel discouraged, they feel that familiar emotion. Now the body is in the past. And if thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. Most people wake up in the morning, and through this process, their entire state of being is in the past. And the repetition of that cycle of the thought and the feeling, the image or the memory of the past and the emotion, the stimulus and the response is conditioning the body, literally, to be in the past, subconsciously. And the body is so objective that it does not know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion the person's fabricating by thought alone. The body's believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The body literally is conditioned in the mind of the past. So that familiar past is called the known. And if we can't think greater than how we feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, and feelings and emotions are a record of the past, living by familiar feelings and having those feelings drive your thoughts, it makes sense then that your life will stay the same, because if you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings become the means of thinking, your thoughts are in the past, and we keep creating more of the past. So a lot of people wake up remembering themselves through their experiences of the past and the emotions that are associated with it, and their entire state of being is in the past. Then people get up and they go through the same routine. They get out of bed on the same side, they scratch themselves the same way, they follow the same routine that they do every morning because they did it yesterday, whether it's their coffee, their breakfast, where they sit, what they do, drive to work, do the same things, go to the grocery store, buy the same foods, sit at the same seat and eat in the same meal, watch your favorite show, scroll through whatever, go to bed, wake up and do it again. A habit is a redundant, often unconscious set of automatic thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body has been programmed to know how to do it better than your conscious mind. Keep thinking the same way, keep making the same choices, keep doing the same things, keep creating the same experiences for the familiar feeling or emotion. That becomes a program. That becomes a hardwired program. And now the body is on autopilot. And it's dragging us into a predictable future based on what we did in the past. In other words, we can take what you did yesterday and your yesterday and almost set it on people's tomorrows. And that's karma. The person is living the same life every single day, and they're headed for a genetic destiny. So now if the body's on autopilot and it's dragging that person into a predictable future based on what they did in the past, they've lost their free will to choose to a set of automatic unconscious programs. And the predictable future then is the known as well. So that predictable future then is the habit of the person living in a program. If the familiar past is the known and the predictable future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that is the sweet spot of the generous present moment. And we've labored for years to be able to demystify this process so that people could know the difference between when they're there and when they're not there. So to change then is to be greater than your body, to be greater than those emotionally conditioned subconscious responses that we have, to be greater than our body as the mind. To change is to be greater than the habit of the body living in an unconscious state of programs. To change is to be greater than the body's drives, its cravings, and its needs. And we use meditation as a way to teach the body how to find that present moment. And that present moment is the unknown, and it's built into our human biology based on living in survival that the unknown is a dangerous place. It's a scary place. So it's much more easy to run from the unknown in survival than to relax into it. And so then, to change, to be greater than the body, to be greater than its habituations, to be greater than its emotional responses and emotional conditions, because when the moment the body's feeling a familiar emotion or responding to someone in the same emotional state or thinking about something in the past, we are literally teaching the body to be the mind of the past. Overcoming those emotions then, overcoming those emotions that keep us connected to the past means that we'd have to be able to lower the volume to those emotions and move back into the present moment. We'll talk more about this. A person sitting in their meditation and doing absolutely nothing except sitting there. And the moment they're sitting there, all of a sudden the body says, well, listen, I haven't had any sadness, any pain, any memories of anger or frustration, and the body all of a sudden starts to feel those familiar emotions. And this is the moment the person says, I can't meditate. This is the moment the person says, this is too hard, I got too many things to do, I got to get up and get going, I'm doing this wrong, whatever it is. And we discovered that when a person notices they're feeling that emotion and they're realizing they're moving back into their past, if they can lower the volume to that emotion and return back to the present moment, that's a victory. The person notices that they want to get up and start doing things, or they want to get up and quit, or they want to get up and check their cell phone or their social media or go do something. If they notice that their body wants to get up and open their eyes and move, instead of saying, I can't do this, we discovered that when a person notices that the body's in its automatic unconscious state, if the person can execute a will that's greater than those programs and return the body back to the present moment, that's a victory as well. And the act of doing this over and over again is like training the body as an animal, to train it to be in the present moment. Catching yourself from going unconscious is the first step to change. So then when you catch yourself with your mind wandering to your cell phone or to your kids or your grandkids or an errand or a problem or a past, we discovered that when you catch yourself doing that and you return back to the present moment, that you're not doing your meditation wrong, you're actually doing it right. Because you're catching yourself from going unconscious and you're making yourself more conscious. And that is the victory. So to change, to overcome the body as the mind in its habits and its emotional conditioning, to change then is to find the generous present moment. To change is to be greater than time. To not let the body and the brain live in the predictable future, the known or the familiar past, the known, but in that sweet spot of the present moment is where the unknown exists. That is the place where we create from. That is where there are unlimited possibilities. In that unknown, that's the perfect place to create from, not the known. Here's the hard one now. To be greater than your environment. To change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than time, and to be greater than your environment. Now, what do I mean by being greater than your environment? Well, every person, every object, everything, every place that you've ever been, experienced, learned, whatever it is mapped neurologically in your brain. Your brain, as I said, is a reflection of your environment. So you have a neurological network for your coworkers, for your cell phone, for your parents, for your kids, for your grandkids, for your friends, for your enemies, your exes. You have a neurological network for where you live, where you lived, where you've been, where you need to go. Everything in your environment is mapped neurologically in your brain. So your brain being a reflection of the environment means that you, every single day, if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, to change your brain and body to look like it's in that future, we're going to have some problems because you're going to see your life through the memory of the past. Think about this. If you talk about your partner or your best friend that you've known for several years, it makes sense you would have a neurological network for that friend. And because you've experienced your friend, you would see your friend based on the memory that you have of them. And that if you have a spouse or a partner or a friend that you hang out and behave with, you're going to behave a certain way around that friend. You're going to behave a certain way around that enemy. You're going to behave a certain way around a person that you despise or dislike. And because you've had an experience with everything in your outer environment, you have an emotion associated with it. And the stronger the emotion you have to a person or a problem or a condition in your life, the more you pay attention to it. And where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And the emotion is energy, and that energy is driving a charge, and that's your thought. And so most people's attention and energy are connected to their outer environment. To change, then, is not to think the same way, not to act the same way, and not to feel the same way in your life, in the same environment. That's what it takes to change. So then, if every object and everything, every person and every place has a neurological network in your brain, and you have an emotion associated with it, if you wake up in the morning and you're not defined by a vision of the future, as you see the same people and you go to the same places and you do the exact same things at the exact same time, it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality. Your personal reality is creating your personality. Your environment is literally controlling your feelings, controlling your thoughts. So then you say to a person, why are you upset today? Why are you in a bad mood? Why do you feel so bitter? And they'll say, I am this way because of this circumstance or this person that's doing this to me in my life. And what they're really saying from a biological standpoint is that person or that condition or that circumstance is literally influencing and controlling them by causing them to think the same way and to feel the same way. They'll say, I feel really unhappy, I feel really sad. Why? Because of this person or circumstance. What they're really saying is, this person or circumstance I'm a victim to, and they're controlling how I feel and how I think. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. The only problem is that if your response to that person or condition is driven by the emotions and the hormones of stress, then it makes sense then that your response to the environment is weakening your body, because stress takes vital energy. It takes energy from the body. So then it would make sense then that you would have to change your emotional response in some way, shape, or form. So then the idea then to think differently, to act differently, and to feel differently in your life while your life currently is the same is this work. So then, if you're not defined by a vision of a future every single day, then you're left with the memories of the past, and for the most part, everything should be the same in your life or predictable in your life. Now, third step, let's talk about what it takes to move into a state of creation, what it takes to move into that present moment, that creative moment. What's the biology of creation? I said it is the heart, is the creative center, and the forebrain or the frontal lobe is the designer of destiny. It's where we can make thought more real than anything else. The problem is that most people spend the majority of their waking day in that unconscious response to the environment, and their unconscious response to the environment is the stress response. And living in stress is living in survival. And when you have a stress response for some threat or some danger or unexpected outcome in your life, you switch on that primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system, and it's designed to keep you alive. It creates an arousal in the body, and the arousal that's created from the hormones of stress knock the body out of its normal state of homeostasis and balance. And stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. There is an innate mechanism in the body once the event is over to cause the body to move back into homeostasis and balance, and that's called the stress response. So all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. If an animal is being chased by a predator and the energy that's released in the body is to outrun the predator, if it literally uses the arousal and uses all that energy to outrun the predator, when the event is over, it naturally returns back into balance. That's what our automatic or autonomic nervous system naturally does. The issue is that no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for an extended period of time. That means if you're living in a state of stress, you're constantly out of homeostasis and constantly out of balance, and there's no time to return back to balance, that imbalance becomes the new balance, and now the person's headed for disease because they're using all of that vital energy that they would normally use for healing, for growth, and repair. They're using it for living in that constant state of emergency mode. And up to 70% of the time, people are living in that state of survival, in that state of stress. And there's physical stresses like traumas and accidents and injuries. There's chemical stress like viruses, bacteria, pesticides, toxins, food allergies, hangovers, deficiencies, toxins, and then there's emotional stress, and that's the big challenge. That is second mortgages, single parenting, family tragedies, finances, unexpected deaths. All of these three things, physically, chemically, or emotionally, knock the brain out of homeostasis and balance. And the emotions of anger and frustration and hatred, of envy, of jealousy, of competition, of control, of importance, of entitlement, of fear, anxiety, worry, insecurity, vigilance, guilt and shame and unworthiness and hopelessness and powerlessness, all of those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, and psychology calls them normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness because when we're living in survival and we're living in stress, we're not ourselves. We are in autonomic dysregulation. Now, the primitive system, the fight or flight nervous system, when it switches on, It's drawing from the vital field of energy that's surrounding the body. It's taking its vital life force and it's turning it into chemistry. And the field around our body begins to shrink. We use energy. Now, if the event is over and we can eat and rest and relax, the body's energy builds. But if we keep doing it over and over again, no organism can live in chronic stress. The field around the body begins to shrink, and all of a sudden we become more matter and less energy, more particle and less wave. At the exact same time, the heart now is beating in that stress response. And as it's beating in the stress response, and you're not running and you're not fighting and you're not hiding, but you're sitting in traffic or sitting on a Zoom call, all that energy that's being activated to knock you out of balance is not being used, and the heart begins to pump against a closed system, against resistance in the arteries, and it starts to beat out of order. And that beating of out of order, that incoherence in the heart, causes the waves of the heart to begin to interfere with each other, and energy goes down in the heart. And that creative center shuts off because it's not a time to create when you're living in stress. It's time to run, fight, or hide. The arousal that's created from the hormones of stress becomes highly addictive. And people use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to some emotion from the hormones of stress. They need the bad job, they need the bad relationships, they need the conflict with people in their life just so they can feel that emotion. They're using their environment and the people in their environment to reaffirm that addiction to that emotion, and they become addicted to the life they don't even like. And the stronger the emotion that they have, the more they pay attention to the problems and the people in their life. And they're mismanaging their attention and mismanaging their energy. Now, we can turn on that stress response just by thought alone. Because of the size of the frontal lobe in the neocortex, we can make thought more real than anything else. We can think about our problems from the past, or we can forecast some future worst case scenario in our mind and make it so real that the body begins to feel the anxiety and the fear of the event before it happens. We're knocking our brain and body out of balance by thought alone. So then, if the hormones of stress are addictive, then we can become addicted to our own thoughts. And if it's a scientific fact that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons to create disease, and you can turn on that stress response just by thought alone, your thoughts can make you sick. So the fundamental question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? And we took a group of people that came to one of our events that in 4 days, they came and they described their emotional states as anxious, depressed, worried, out of balance, frustrated, impatient. We said, okay, trade those states of mind and body for some elevated emotions. Let's start giving thanks for the future we don't even have. Let's open our hearts and let's start feeling these emotions. And let's hold on to these thoughts. In 4 days, they upregulated all kinds of proteins that cause their immune system to strengthen by 50%. Remember, the environment signals the gene. The end product of the experience in the environment is an emotion. They're no longer down-regulating the same genes. They're up-regulating new genes because the emotion is signaling the gene ahead of the environment. And so in 4 days, the immune system, the system that's responsible for internal protection instead of external protection, gets energy for regulating the proper proteins so that it can make immunoglobulins for the body to return back into homeostasis and balance. We found out that people could do that in 4 days. So then, under the gun of the fight or flight nervous system, the arousal of those chemicals to give the body a rush of adrenaline causes us to feel our body more. We feel more in our bodies when we are in that aroused state. The body gets a rush of energy and we feel our body. When we're being chased by Tyrannosaurus Rex, we have all of our attention on the outer environment. The brain is putting more of its attention out there in the outer world to find a place or a thing it can hide behind or a place to go. And we narrow our focus on the outer world, and those hormones of stress heighten the senses, and we become materialists. That's what happens. So now all of our attention is on the objects and things and people in our outer world. And when you're being chased by T-Rex and you have to move from one point of consciousness where you're running from to another point of consciousness, the cave, the movement through space means it's going to take time. So under the gun of those chemicals, our attention is on time. Living in stress, our bodies, our environment, and time are the things we put our attention on the most. But we said just a few minutes ago, to change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time. And it turns out, when we're living addicted to the hormones of stress or we're living in constant stress, it's really hard to change because it goes against the primitive system that says it's not a time to change. Converting out of that fight or flight nervous system that is dysregulating the body out of order, converting from that addictive state into a different state takes an enormous amount of self-regulation, an enormous amount of awareness, and we discovered that people could actually do it. Independent of where they live, where they're from, how bad their past was, what they eat, if they have a disease, if they're young, they're old. Once they understand how to convert out of this one state of high aroused emergency mode into another state, their body had energy for growth and repair. And as they lowered the volume to all the things in their life that they used for an addictive emotional state, they kept overcoming that emotion, they kept overcoming that emotion, keep settling the body back into the present moment. Somehow the body all of a sudden began to relax into the present moment, and they took their attention when they no longer had that emotion off that person or problem, and somehow they call energy back to them. They take their power back, and they begin to build their own electromagnetic field. And when that occurs, we see this over and over again. The body is no longer in that state of survival. Energy naturally moves into the heart. It's where it automatically goes. And the heart informs the brain that the trauma, the stress, the event is over, and it resets the baseline. And the brain goes back into order, and it goes back into that imaginary state. That's when we start thinking of possibilities that we've never thought before. When we're living in stress, and stress is created when you can't control something, you can't predict something, and you have the perception that something's going to get worse. The moment that arousal takes place, we try to control, we try to predict, we try to figure out how we're going to change that worst case scenario, and we shift our attention from one person, to another problem, to another meeting, to another object, to another person, to another thing. And every single one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain, and the arousal of shifting our attention causes those individual networks in the brain to begin to fire out of order. They begin to compartmentalize, they begin to modulate, and the brain becomes a house divided against itself. And now the brain is incoherent. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And when the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. And that high state of arousal causes the brain waves to go very, very high. We over-focus on our problems. We become overly analytical. And now the brain is in a state of dysregulation. And the autonomic nervous system, when it's in dysregulation, controlling, coordinating all other systems of the body, sends a very incoherent message to all the cells and tissues in those different systems in the body, and the body moves out of balance, whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's infertility, whether it's heart conditions, whether it's immune problems, whether it's muscular pain. The body now is in a state of dysregulation and disorder. So we discovered that when people are in this state and they narrow their focus, and they over-focus on the problems and the people in their life, they're putting all their attention on the material world, on everything that's known. What if we could teach them to open their awareness, to open their focus, and take their attention off of all the people in their life, off their body, off of everything in their environment, all the objects, all the things, not predict the future, not think about the past, labor for that present moment. What could we do to cause the brain to become more orderly? And when people go from that kind of convergent, narrow, over-focused state, obsessive state, and they open their awareness and sense space, and they put their attention on nothing material, nothing physical, that's all the known, but sensing nothing in space. The act of broadening their focus and sensing, the act of sensing nothing, causes those different compartments of the brain that were once subdivided to begin to unify. What synchronizes or syncs in the brain links in the brain. Communities of neurons start functioning together, and the brain starts moving into a very, very orderly, coherent state. And if people are sensing and they're not thinking, they start suppressing their analytical mind, and their brain waves start to slow down from that high beta brainwave state all the way down to a mid-range to a low level. And if you stay with it and you keep sensing, all of a sudden your brain waves move into these beautiful, coherent alpha brainwave patterns. And that's the moment the heart and the brain begin to work together. The formula that we discovered is that state of being relaxed in your heart and awake in your brain. Somehow, relaxed and awake causes us to function better than being stressed out, unconscious, and living in a program. So in that creative state, the forebrain now, the heart is informing the brain that it's a perfect time to create. And the frontal lobe, the crowning achievement of the human being, the designer, the architect, the dreamer of the future, can ask, what would it be like to be healthy, to be wealthy, to be free, to be in love, to be unlimited, to have the job of my dreams? The frontal lobe asks the question. It's the creative center. And looks out over the landscape of the brain and says, what do I have here to build that dream? So it draws on the circuits in the brain that are already installed in there based on the things you've learned and the things that you experience, and calls them up, starts to select them. And when it gets enough networks of neurons firing in tandem, the brain creates an image. And that image is called intention. That's a vision, a new possibility in the future. The heart informs the brain to do that, and the more coherent the brain is, the clearer the vision. To the passionate person, to the person who is truly involved in that vision, the dream in their mind, the vision in their mind literally feels like the experience. And the moment they start feeling the emotion of that future, before it happens, their heart begins to open. And their heart begins to become highly coherent. So now they're feeling the emotion of that future before it happens, and they're giving their body a taste of the future emotionally. And it just takes a clear intention and an elevated emotion, a new thought and a new feeling, a new image, a new emotion, a new stimulus and response, and you begin to condition the mind and body to look like the event has already occurred. And the stronger the emotion you feel, the more you'll remember that vision. You'll be remembering your future. And somehow that produces a change in people's biology. And when people move into that creative state and they have no attention on their body, they become a nobody. When they have no attention on the people in their life that they identify with, they become a no one. When they're putting their attention on anything physical and material, any objects or things in their life, now they're in nothing. If they're not thinking about where they go, where they're sitting, where they are from, where they need to be, they can go from somewhere to nowhere. And if they're not thinking about the predictable future and the familiar past, they go from some time to no time. And they're disinvesting all of their attention and energy out of everything known, out of the three-dimensional world. And that is the moment of creation. That is the unknown. We have labored with people over the years to be able to demystify this process. And people now, once they know how to do that, they can regulate their brainwaves and they get beyond their analytical mind. And what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And you begin to suppress the thinking brain, the critic in your head that's always talking to you. And you move into alpha, the door opens. And now you're entering the operating system where all those automatic programs exist, those subconscious programs exist. And you can rehearse a new way of being. You can rewrite a new program. You can install new chemistry. There's a change in brainwave states, and as you slow your brainwaves down, you begin to slow down your thinking neocortex and energy moves right out of the brain. We've seen this thousands of times, right into the limbic brain. Now you're conscious in your subconscious mind. And some people can regulate in that state of relaxed and awake where they're now in theta brainwave states. And now in theta, lights are out in the thinking neocortex, what plugs you into three-dimensional reality, the identity, the autobiographical self, the memory bank of the self, the repository of everything you've known and experienced in your life. Lights are out here. And in theta, there's a door that's so open between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind that now you're suggestible, like a hypnotic state, to information. And whatever thought that you're thinking or intending, you will accept, believe, and surrender to be the truth without ever analyzing it, and that's exactly what begins to program the subconscious mind. And we've discovered that people, when they do this really well, they can have an instantaneous change or healing that takes place in their body, instantaneous. And we've seen people heal from hundreds of times from stage 4 cancer that has metastasized to everywhere in their body. I can't believe it. Tumors in their abdomens that were large, completely gone. Blindness, deafness, I know this is crazy, Parkinson's disease, ALS, lupus, myasthenia gravis, spinal cord injuries, stroke injuries, severe genetic disorders that medical science had no solution for, muscular dystrophy. We've seen all kinds of crazy changes that have taken place in people's biology when they change. So I want to just run through a few slides with you. I know I talked for a long time, but I had to get all that out so that when I show you the slides here, it'll reaffirm everything that we talked about. So here we go. We've done all these scientific tests, and we've done the tests for a really simple reason. We want to gain information through the process of transformation. So give people the information, have them wired in their brain, set up the conditions in the environment for them to experience it. If they can get their behaviors to match their intentions and actions equal to their thoughts, if we can measure what's going on during that process of transformation, we will gain more information from what we pick up from a scientific standpoint and what we measure, analyze that measurement. Now we have more information to teach transformation, and we can close the gap between knowledge and experience. And that's what we've been doing for a very long time. And I can tell you the data that we have is so outstanding that change is possible and that healing is possible. So you know now that you define your personality as how you think, how you act, and how you feel. We say your personality is your state of being. So then keep thinking the same way, keep acting the same way, keep feeling the same way. You're the same personality, and that same personality is creating the same personal reality. No magic there. Start thinking differently, wire that information in your brain, start acting differently, behaving differently. Start feeling differently. If you think differently, you act differently, you feel differently, you create a new person, and a new person creates a new life. In other words, if you had a kid, and your son said, "I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 25 or 35," and he's at this personality, you would say to him, in order for you to get to here, you're going to have to change a lot of things about yourself and do a lot of things and think differently and learn new information, make a lot of new choices, a lot of sacrifices. You got to hit a lot of goals, new experiences, and you got to keep your energy up. You can't get discouraged before you arrive there. It makes sense that would be the case. So same personality creates the same personal reality. Same you, same life. Same thoughts, same actions, same behavior, same emotions, same personality, same personal reality. Same thoughts, same actions, same feelings, same life. That means if it's routine, if you're doing the same thing that's known to you, if it's familiar to you all the time, if it's predictable, for the most part, the same means living in the past. Your life is staying the same means you're living in your past. And nothing changes in your life until you change. And you change your future more when you change your past. Here are some thoughts that people think that they don't even know that they think, because they're hardwired in their brain. I'm too tired. It has an effect on the body. I'm too busy. Nothing will ever change. I hate my job. My pain will never go away. No one appreciates how hard I work. These are thoughts that people accept every day. If they wanted to change, they'd have to get conscious of these unconscious thoughts. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. If the person's complaining and blaming, gossiping and procrastinating, making excuses and judging others, if they truly wanted to change their personality, they would have to get really conscious of these unconscious behaviors, so unconscious that they don't go unconscious to them again. What are the emotions? Frustration, anger, anxiety, resentment, sadness, unworthiness. Am I telling you to suppress your emotions? No, I'm telling you that when you overcome the emotion, the memory without the emotional charge from the past is called wisdom. And now you've owned it, you've done it, you never need to do it again, and now you belong to the future instead of the past. In other words, if you want to be wealthy, you can't take unworthiness with you. If you want happiness, you got to stop being unhappy. Does that make sense? So it'd be prudent then, if you were truly in the process of change, and when I move out of balance in my life, I go right back to the basics. I write down 3 thoughts. I write down 3 behaviors, and I write down 3 emotions that I'm going to work on changing and not thinking, not feeling, and not acting in one day. So then, a new personality then creates a new personal reality, new you, new life. New thoughts, new actions, new feelings, new future. When you change your personality, you change your personal reality. Your future is no longer your past. Keep thinking the same thoughts, keep making the same choices, keep doing the same things, keep creating the same experiences, keep feeling the same feelings and emotions, and we discovered that people's biology very rarely changes. It stays the same because they're the same. Give people new information, have them wired in their brain, have them think differently, ask them to make different choices than they typically do, step in that river of change, tell them it's going to be uncomfortable, they're going to come up against themselves, get their behaviors to match their intentions, their actions equal to their thoughts. They have a new experience, and that new experience produces a new feeling and a new emotion, and that influences new thoughts, and that's called evolution. So then, the known is the same thought, the same choice, the same behavior, the same experience, the same feeling and emotion. The known is the wheel. Person stays on that wheel, living in an automatic state to continuously reproduce the same experiences by making the same choices and doing the same things to reaffirm the feeling of who they want to be or what they can expect from that experience. And the reason that most people can't get out of bed in the morning, because the body can predict the feeling of every experience in their life, and it's resigned to life. Eric Kandel, Nobel Prize laureate, learn one piece of information, review it for an hour, and double the number of connections in your brain. If you don't think about it, you don't review it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. Every time you learn something new, this is what happens in your brain. This is learning. This is forging new connections. If you learned anything new from what we talked about in the last hour and 15 minutes or so, your brain did this. That's learning. Watch it again. Every time you learn something new, you make a new connection in your brain, that's learning. Once those neurons fire and wire together, they create a long-term relationship, and just like any relationship, the more you communicate, the stronger the bond. And memory is when synaptic connections are maintained and sustained. So then it makes sense, learn that information, wire it in your brain, to make a new choice, demonstrate a new behavior, create a new experience, and feel a new feeling or an emotion. Now you're in an unknown, you're in a new life. The unknown is new, it's unpredictable. And those new thoughts lead to new choices, to new behaviors, new experiences, new feelings. And a person's on their way to a new life. New thoughts, new choices, new behaviors, new experiences, new feelings creates a new personal reality. Same thoughts, same choices, same actions, behaviors, experiences, and feelings. That is the same personality. So, I said in order to change, you got to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time. We said to be greater than your body is to be greater than how you feel, those familiar feelings that you live by every day. to be greater than your automatic, unconscious, programmed habits, to be greater than your past memories and experiences that define you based on the past, and be greater than those conditioned emotional responses that are stored in the body as the mind. I say when you use familiar feelings as a barometer to change, if you check in with your feelings, you'll always talk yourself out of it because you just won't feel like it. Think a certain thought, turn on a certain circuits in your brain. The thought produces a chemical for you to feel exactly the way you were just thinking. The moment you begin to feel the way you think, the brain checks in with your body and says, yes, you're feeling pretty miserable, and it generates more corresponding thoughts equal to the way you're feeling. Keep doing it over and over again, thinking the same way, feeling the same way. You conditioning your body into the past and hardwiring your brain into a familiar, automatic state of mind. Same past state of being, same thoughts, same feelings. Thoughts are the language of the brain. Feelings are the language of the body. How you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So if you feel insecure, those feelings are going to influence more insecure thoughts, will produce more chemicals for you to feel more insecure, and the cycle can go on for years on end. The redundancy of this particular cycle is the conditioning process that creates a person in an automatic, unconscious state of being. So what is a state of being? It's when your mind and body are working together, when your thoughts and feelings are aligned, and it could be aligned to anything, positive, negative, good, or bad. And when you say, I'm insecure, I am worthy, I'm unworthy, I'm unhappy, I'm wealthy, I'm successful, and so on, whatever you say and you feel, you are affirming your mind, your thoughts, and your body, your feelings, into a particular state of being, into a destiny. That is your personality then, and it creates your personal reality. One more time, thoughts are the language of the brain, feelings are the language of the body. How you think and how you feel creates your state of being. The thought and the feeling, the memory, the emotion, the stimulus and response. Take a look at this guy. Person has the thought, my boss is unfair, sets the circuits off in their brain. I'm underpaid, turn on another circuits in their brain. I'm not appreciated, turn on another set of circuits in their brain. I'm overworked. Nobody listens to me. When I get enough networks of neurons firing in a sequence, pattern, or combination, I'm producing a level of mind. The moment those neurons fire in tandem, we get an internal representation of ourself. If we accept, believe, and surrender to that image without analyzing it, the neurotransmitters in the brain begin to signal the chemical brain, the emotional brain, the limbic brain, and it manufactures a host of different chemicals that signal the body to activate the witless adrenal glands. The moment those adrenal glands are switched on, you're feeling really angry, and they're secreting certain chemicals that cause you to get aroused and to want to do something. Once those chemicals are signaled, that energy center switches on in the body, and the moment you're feeling angry, the brain checks in with the body and says, yeah, you're pretty angry right now, and it begins to generate more corresponding thoughts equal to the way you were feeling, hardwiring the brain into a very familiar signature, firing and wiring those thoughts over and over again. Get enough networks of neurons firing in a sequence, pattern, or combination. Once they fire in tandem, you reaffirm that identity that you have of yourself. The moment the thought in your brain becomes the experience, the end product of the experience is called an emotion, and here we go. Neurotransmitters signal neurohormones, and all of a sudden those trophic molecules are signaling different hormonal centers, and there's an electrochemical signal that's sent to the bloodstream and through the spinal cord, and here we go again. Those chemicals and that signal activate the adrenal glands, and now you're feeling angry again, activating the center, secreting all of its hormones. The body is prepared to do something. It's aggressive, it's going to fight, it's going to run, it's going to use its energy. You're feeling bitter, you're feeling angry, you're going to think more corresponding thoughts equal to how you're feeling. And some people do this for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, hardwiring their brain into the same signature called their personality and conditioning their body to become the mind of aggression. And now their entire state of being, their entire personality has this in their body-mind. It could be a different set of thoughts. You can turn on different thoughts in your brain to produce a different level of mind. And if you get enough networks of neurons firing in a sequence, pattern, or combination, and those neurons can fire in tandem, once they fire in tandem, you get a different internal representation of yourself, a different image of yourself. If you accept this image as yourself or your identity, you believe in it, you surrender to it without analyzing it, the thought in your mind becomes the experience, and the end product of the experience is an immediate chemical signal that's sent to the limbic brain, the chemical brain, and it whips out a different batch of chemicals that signals the body with different information. And that energy moves right into that second energy center, and now we're feeling pretty bad. We're feeling really unhappy. We're suffering. We're in pain. The moment the body is feeling really bad, and energy is released, hormones are secreted from the center, the brain checks in with the body and says, you're really miserable, and it begins to generate more corresponding thoughts equal to that feeling. Firing and wiring the same circuits in the brain, doing it over and over again, get enough circuits firing in a sequence, pattern, or combination, this mind becomes more hardwired, and of course, we create that internal representation or image that we believe is who we are. If we accept, believe, and surrender to that identity, neurotransmitters begin to influence neuropeptides, and the cycle goes on ad infinitum. Hardwiring the brain into the same mind, creating that same personality, hardwired and emotionally signaling the body to become the mind of guilt and suffering and pain. And now the body is now the mind of that emotion, and you're taking thought in the form of chemistry and storing it as energy in the body. And this cycle can go on for years on end. So crossing the river of change then is going from the old self to the new self. And the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. It's going to feel unpredictable because you just left the known. And that unknown then is the river of change. And people say to me, how can I predict my future in the unknown? The best way to predict it is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. Crossing that river of change is the neurological, it is the biological, it is the chemical, it is the hormonal, it is the genetic death of the old self. A part of us must die in the process of change. And we've seen this on thousands of brain scans. The brains of many people in the river of change go into cognitive disorder. They're no longer firing and wiring the same thoughts. They're no longer demonstrating the same behaviors. They're in that unlearning process, that breaking the habit process. They're no longer sending the same emotional signals to the body. The body's in chaos. It's not making its same hormones, and it just wants to return back to familiar territory. If the person can cross the river and say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What behaviors do I want to demonstrate today? Let me mentally rehearse them. Let me install the brain and prime the brain with new circuitry so I have circuits to use when I'm in my work with my coworkers or when I'm with my children. Can I teach my body emotionally what the future will feel like before it's happening? I'm not waiting for my wealth to feel abundant. I'm not waiting for my success to feel empowered. I'm not waiting for my new relationship to feel love. I'm not waiting for my healing to feel gratitude. I'm going to feel the emotion before, and I'm going to remember this emotion so much that no person, no circumstance, no condition will move me from it in my life. Think differently, act differently, feel differently, cross the river of change, new opportunities, new synchronicities, new coincidences, new things that appear in your life that you would have never had if you stayed on the banks of the familiar known. So the model for change biologically, and it's so important for us to realize this, I've interviewed thousands of people that have had all kinds of healings in their body. And many of them said, I just had to stop being myself. They had to unlearn and relearn. They had to break the habit of being themselves and reinvent a new self. They had to prune those synaptic connections and sprout new connections. They had to lose their mind, their old mind, and create a new one by unfiring and unwiring and refiring and rewiring. They had to become familiar, become conscious of that old self, so conscious that they would not go unconscious to it, and then they have to become familiar with a new self. They would have to deprogram and reprogram, unmemorize an emotion that's been stored in their body, whatever that emotion is, and recondition their body to a new mind, to a new emotion, going from living in the past to creating a new future. That is living in the same past, moving from an old energy into a new energy. So, same familiar, known, routine, predictable. That's where most people spend the majority of their life. That is the routine old self. That's the habit of being themselves. The unfamiliar, the unknown, the different, the unpredictable is when you take a chance on possibility. And that means you have to believe in yourself in order to believe in possibility. That means when you believe in possibility, you have to believe in yourself. And stepping out of the known shouldn't take crisis or disease or diagnosis or loss to do. We should do that just because it's exciting to be a creator in our life instead of a victim in our life. That is the new self. So a habit is a redundant, often unconscious and automatic pattern of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. Do it over and over again. Do it so much that your body knows how to do it better than your conscious mind. So if I said to you, how do you open a doorknob? The moment I ask you that, most people would reach down with their hand and turn their hand one way or the other to determine which way to open the doorknob. Now, you couldn't consciously remember. Your conscious mind couldn't remember, but your body mind did it so many times that it has the memory. That's where 95% of who we are is in that state where the body's doing it better than the conscious mind. So, to be greater than your body then, and to change a habit, you have to break your routine and move beyond the choices that lead you to the same predictable future. That means you have to stop making the same choices. To be greater than the habits that keep you connected to the same predictable future. To become conscious of your unconsciously programmed thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. So the conditioning process to keep the body as the mind is the thought and the feeling, the memory and the emotion, the stimulus and response, and that conditions us into the familiar past. That is the known. The habit, the redundant, unconscious, automatic pattern of thought, behavior, and emotion that's acquired through doing it over and over again, or repetition, is when you've done something so many times, now your body knows how to do it better than your conscious mind. When you're in a habit, your body is the mind of the predictable future. That's the known. So the conditioning process is based on the past, the familiar past. That's the known. And a habit is when your body is programmed into a predictable future, which is the known. And the only place that's left where the unknown truly exists is that's the sweet spot of the generous present moment. To be greater than your environment, to be greater than the current circumstances, the conditions in your life, to be greater than your problems, to be greater than any familiar and known, anything familiar or known in your current personal reality. It means then, to be greater than your environment means that you have to modify the way you think, act, and feel in the same environment. That means then that to think, act, and feel in your same life differently. So the environment, what is it made of? It's made of people and relatives and family and neighbors and friends and enemies and colleagues and coworkers, employees, clients, drivers on your commute, people at the grocery store, coffee shop, barista. Those are the people in your life that you have a neurological network for. Objects and things, your car, your cell phone, your computer, your bed, your television, your pets. And then there's different experiences at different times and places. It could be a Zoom call on Monday morning. It could be a dinner with your family in the evening, a conflict with a person from a past relationship, an hour of scrolling through social media in bed. Every one of these experiences are taking place at a certain time and place. So let's go a little bit further. If your environment is made up of all those things, and the people and objects and things at certain times and places are causing you to think the same way, to make the same choices, to behave the same way, to create the same experiences and feel the same emotions, then your environment is controlling you. That means that you're a victim to your environment. Act the same way around the same people, think the same way around the same people, do the same things around your same objects like your cell phone, keep recreating the same experiences, and let the environment control your feelings, then you'll never change. Your personal reality is creating your personality. The influencing of the environment and creating the emotional response makes us victim to the environment. Thinking and acting and feeling in the same environment in the same way because of the people and things in your outer life keeps you the same, and nothing changes in your life until you change. If you can't think or feel greater than your environment, you are a victim to your environment. If you say to someone, "Why are you feeling this way?" and they say it's because of this person or circumstance, it's their environment that's making them think and feel that way. Now, simple, to be greater than time. To stop thinking about time. To become so present with what you're doing or experience that you lose track of time. We've all had this experience. To be in the present moment, which is the unknown, not the known. To resist the urge to tell the familiar story of your past. To quit reliving and wallowing in the past. To stop trying to predict the future based on the past. To overcome the need to anticipate the next moment. Okay, so there's the now. That's the present moment. Most people are living in their familiar past because their memories and their emotions are keeping them in the familiar past. That familiar state of being, that conditioning process that's called the known. If their body's on autopilot and it's taking them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past, in other words, they're doing the same thing as they did yesterday the next day, then their body's in a predictable future, and that's called a habit, and that's the known. So if the familiar past and the predictable future are the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the sweet spot of that generous present moment. That is the creative moment. That's where all possibilities exist. So we said that living in a state of survival is living in a state of stress, and we live in two states of mind and body, survival or creation. Now, survival is stress. Creation is that flow or that zone where the universe somehow seems to be behind us. 3 types of stress: physical stress, trauma, injuries, accidents, falls, strains, fatigues, lack of sleep; chemical stress, toxins, flus, viruses, colds, bacteria, hormones in food, pesticides, heavy metals, imbalanced blood sugar levels, pollutants, poisons, hangovers. All knock the body out of chemical balance. Emotional stress, family tragedies, losses, second mortgages, parenting challenges, loss of a job, poor food job satisfaction, bad internet connections, traffic. All 3 of these type of stresses, physical, chemical, or emotional, knock the brain and body out of balance. 75 to 90% of every person that walks into a healthcare facility in the Western world walks in because of psychological and emotional stress. In other words, between 8 and 9 out of 10 people that visit a doctor are visiting because of emotional and psychological stress. Important to know that emotions have this dramatic effect on our health and biology. You perceive a lion. The moment you perceive a lion, the brain recognizes that that's a danger or a threat. And that danger or threat switches on the limbic brain, the seat of the autonomic nervous system, And it begins to send a profound signal to those adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands wants you to do something in order to overcome that stress or that survival state in order to live. Once it happens, the body moves out of balance. The body's ready for the threat. Pupils dilate, salivary juices shut off. There's no blood flow into the internal organs. The heart races, the respiratory rate increases, blood is sent to the extremities and away from the internal organs, and now the body's out of homeostasis, and it's out of homeostasis and balance is because it has to survive. Very primitive. It's in many different creatures in nature. It's a survival system. But what if it's not a lion, but what if it's a diagnosis from a doctor, and that diagnosis from the doctor causes you to have a stress response and you feel an enormous amount of fear? The same thing that happens as if there was a lion, but instead of it being a lion, you're perceiving that same environmental condition as if it was. You're doing the very same thing to your body, and what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. Because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because no organism can live in emergency mode for extended periods of time. If all of that energy is going for some threat in the outer world, there's no energy in the inner world for growth and repair, and the constant state of stepping on the gas over and over again, causes the autonomic nervous system to start dysregulating. And the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates all other systems, and all other systems become compromised because of our reaction to the environment. The emotions of stress, or the hormones of stress, create these emotions from anger to shame to resentment to fear to frustration, to powerlessness to anxiety to worry to insecurity, depression, envy, jealousy, judgment, pain, hatred, sadness, suffering, guilt, hopelessness, impatience, aggression. These are all derived from the hormones of stress. So, when we're under stress, we tend to be self-involved, self-absorbed, self-serving, self-aggrandizing, self-centered, self-important, full of self-pity, and self-indulgent, because the hormones of stress cause us to become selfish. In survival, in stress, the only thing that matters is you in survival. I told you that we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can think about your problems. You can have thoughts in your brain. Those thoughts then will do the exact same thing as if you were being chased by a lion. And by turning on the stress response just by thought alone, it means we can knock our brain and body out of balance by thought alone. That means our thoughts can literally make us sick. And people do this, and they become addicted to their own thoughts. And this is why change is so hard, because breaking any addiction requires you to go through cravings, because the body is trying to be the mind and return back to what it's dependent on. So, if living in stress or living in survival causes you to focus on three things: your environment, and that's people and objects and things and places, on your body, and obsessing about time, and to change is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than your body, and to be greater than time, it means then when we're living in stress and we're living in survival and we're out of balance, it's really hard to change. So now, when you emotionally react to a situation in your life and it causes the stress response, there's a chemical change in your body. That experience occurs and you allow those emotions to linger for hours or days. That's called a mood. So you say, hey John, why are you in a mood? Oh, I'm in a mood because this thing that happened to me this morning, and I'm still having one long emotional reaction. If you have an experience in your life and the emotion that's created from that refractory period of that event lasts for weeks or months, that's called a temperament. That's one long emotional reaction. The person is memorizing that emotional state. We could say then, hey, John, why are you still angry? This happened to me 3 months ago, and I'm still angry by that event. Have it last for years or decades. That's called a personality trait. Learning how to shorten your emotional reactions to people and things in your life is called emotional intelligence, and it turns out you can teach people how to do this really well. And the only chemicals that are being activated from the hormones of stress, the only person that's affecting is the person who's feeling it. And it has to beg the question, justified or not, is this loving to me? And breaking the addiction and learning how to shorten the refractory period of the emotional response is what allows people to move their brain and their body out of the past. If you never overcome the emotion from a past experience, you'll never gain the wisdom from that experience. Wisdom is the memory without the emotional charge, and now you're ready for a whole new life, a whole new experience. You can't go to the future holding on to the emotions of the past. Now, we discovered that if the hormones of stress cause you to put all your attention on your body, all of your attention on the people in your life, the objects in your life, the things in your life, the places in your life, and time, then what if you took all of your attention off of your body and you became nobody? No awareness of your body. Took all of your attention off your body. If you took all of your attention off all the people in your life, you would be a no one. If you took all of your attention of all the things that you usually put your attention on, if you weren't thinking about where you needed to go or where you were, or even where you were sitting, and you're not thinking about the time it is or what's going to happen next or what happened yesterday, and you could fall into that moment called the present moment, that's the moment you are aware of nothing but you. That is the creative state, and this is the moment the brain starts getting very organized. This is the moment when you're greater than your body, when you're greater than your environment, and you're greater than time. And that is exactly the state we use to help people to change, to become nobody, no one, no thing, no where, and no time. That is the moment they are pure consciousness. Conscious of nothing but them, finally not thinking about anything else but where they want their awareness to go. That is the eye of the needle into the door of creation. Now, get to that state and open your heart. Energy naturally moves to the heart. When you start getting excited, enthusiastic, inspired, falling in love with your dream, your vision, when you're feeling grateful for what's about to come, the moment you feel that emotion, the heart tells the brain to think of things that are equal to this emotional state. The energy of the heart is telling the brain to have an intention, a vision. And once we can see that vision, we can only see that vision when we feel the emotions associated with it. So just take a look at this simple video and tell me the emotion you may feel after just watching this small video. So then, something as simple as watching that few-minute video, you could move into an inspired, encouraged, more invincible state. And when the heart opens, it informs the brain to create, and the frontal lobe is the creative center. That's the center of your free will. That's where you learn. That's where you learn information. It's where you have intention. It's where you invent new possibilities. It's where you have attention. It's where you speculate new ideas, when you decide on something, when you concentrate, when you perform emotional restraint, when you plan something, or when you're creating new possibilities. That is the place where we can make thought more real than anything else. Now, 3 things about the frontal lobe. I said it's the creative center. It's also the volume control. When you are truly moving into the present moment, the frontal lobe acts like a volume control, and it lowers the volume to the circuits in the rest of the brain, so you can focus on a single-minded thought. Your inner world becomes more real than your outer world, and you get beyond your body, your environment, and time. It's the seat of your conscience. It's so big that you can become aware or conscious of your unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, so conscious that you won't go unconscious to them. That is the seat of how we change. So when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you're changing your state of being from the familiar past to a predictable future, from the known state of being to the unknown. So check this out. You may have a thought, what is compassion? You read the book on compassion, you watched a couple videos on it. Okay, so I got the book, I understand what it is. My aunt was a super compassionate person. Oh yeah, I saw that video. Oh yeah, I learned a few things about compassion. I remember when I helped somebody that was in need. I have a lot of compassion for myself. Get enough networks of neurons firing together. The moment you put them all together, you can create a possibility that you are unaware of, and that's called intention. You can see that more clearly. When your inner world becomes more real than your outer world, that's exactly what it takes to install new circuitry in your brain. That's when you lose track of space and time. That is the moment you get beyond yourself. Have you ever been so lost in something that you were doing, lost in some act, that the act literally creates the experience and you lose track of space and time? So check it out. The frontal lobe turns on, it has connections to all other parts of the brain, and it dampens down the motor centers in the brain, and you get really still. It dampens down the sensory centers of the brain where you feel your body, and you no longer feel your body. It quiets the circuits in the brain in the parietal lobe where you process space and time. It shuts off your visual cortex where you see the world. Lowers the volume to the association centers in the brain where your identity exists, where all the knowns are, where you hear. Lower the volume to the emotional brain and slow it down. And that's the moment then that the thought in your brain literally becomes the experience. It also is a seat of our conscience, metacognition. Metacognition means that we can observe our thoughts. In other words, just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true. The act of observation, or staying conscious of our thoughts and not accepting them, not believing in them, not surrendering them as if they were the truth. Watching those circuits fire, observing them fire, and no longer participating in them, no longer feeling the emotions associated with it. The act of doing this is actually what it takes to change the brain. And we discover that when people get to that point where they want to quit, where they want to stop, and they don't want to go any further because that voice is telling them to stop or give up or don't do this, you should be doing something else. A person goes past that point, that's when the brain changes the most. That's when they're truly in that change process in the river. So then, 2 states of mind and body. You can live in stress, or that's survival, or you could live in creation, that's homeostasis. In stress, there's contraction, there's catabolism, there's disease, there's breakdown, there's imbalance, there's degeneration, fear, anger, pain, sadness, selfish, tensions on the ego. All the attention is on the body, the environment, and time. There's always a loss of energy. It's constant emergency mode. We're narrow focused. We're obsessive. We're over-focused. We feel separate from everything, even our dreams. Reality is determined by the senses. It's cause and effect in our life, waiting for our life to change so that we can feel better. It's limited possibilities. It's the familiar past, predictable future. It's very sensory-based. The brain and heart are highly coherent. Creative state is homeostasis. It's expansion. It's anabolism. That's tissue repair. It's health. It's balance. It's regeneration. Love, joy, gratitude, elevated emotions somehow are the creative emotions. When our heart is open and we feel elevated emotions, we're more selfless. We're less ego. We want to give more. We're no body, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time. That's the creative process. Energy is always generated in the brain and the heart. There's growth and repair. Our awareness is expanded. Our focus is open. We feel connected. We're creating a reality beyond our senses. There's possibilities there. We're in the present moment. We're no longer in the predictable future or familiar past. We're in the unpredictable future. We're creating beyond our senses, and the brain and heart and the human nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, moves into regulation and order. Meditation means to become familiar with. It's exactly what it means, to become so conscious of your unconscious self that you don't go unconscious to it. In other words, write down those thoughts, write down those behaviors, write down those emotions, and become so familiar with them, so aware of them that you don't go unconscious. Write down 3 new thoughts, 3 new behaviors, 3 new emotions. Review those thoughts. Keep remembering them. Rehearse how you're going to be in certain circumstances. Install the circuitry. Keep doing it. Make it familiar to you. Trade those limited emotions for elevated emotions. Make different chemicals and keep doing it until those chemicals and emotions feel familiar to you. To know thyself. To get beyond your body, your environment, and time. If your environment, your body, and time have been dictating everything in your life, it would be a great idea in meditation to disconnect from the environment, to close your eyes, to play music in the background, to sit your body down, to not eat, to not taste, to not smell, to not move and feel. Teach your body how to stay, not in the predictable future, the familiar past, but the present moment. We use meditation to get beyond the environment, the body, and time, and that is the exact model we use for change. We do meditation to change. And the last one I want to talk about before we finish here is just a few minutes, is to change your brain waves and move beyond the analytical mind. Now, different brain waves. You're all in beta brain waves, hopefully right now. Your brain waves in beta means you're processing a lot of sensory information from everything you're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling. Your brain's got to create coherence and meaning between your inner world and your outer world, and it's got to integrate a lot of information. Close your eyes, take a couple breaths, relax a little bit. Your brain waves in your thinking brain slow down into alpha. In alpha, it's more of a creative state. In beta, more of your attention is on your outer world. In alpha, more attention is on your inner world. Slow your brain waves down even further, and now your brain starts to shut off, and you move into theta brain waves. That's a hypnotic state, and you're very suggestible to information. That's where you rewrite the program. Delta is deep sleep, and gamma is superconsciousness. We have a lot of great brain scans of people in high gamma when they hit a great moment. Energy moves out of the thinking neocortex, and it flows back out of that thinking brain right into the limbic brain, the seat of the autonomic nervous system. The purpose of meditation is to get beyond the analytical mind. What separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. 5% of who we are is our conscious mind. 95% has been programmed subconsciously. So if you're going to change a subconscious program, you got to get beyond the analytical mind, out of your conscious mind, into that subconscious mind, get into the operating system where you can change those habits, behaviors, and emotional reactions. So then some people have a very thin analytical mind, the thin veil between their conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and they're very suggestible to information. Others of us have a little bit denser of an analytical mind, and we have to work harder to get beyond it. The more analytical you are, the less suggestible you are to information. Suppress your analytical mind, stop thinking, and the more suggestible you are to information. And that's exactly what can program the autonomic nervous system to manufacture a pharmacy of chemicals equal to the person's intention. So our job is to go from those high beta brain waves to mid-range beta to low-level beta. Keep sensing space, keep opening your awareness, keep laboring for the present moment, get beyond the analytical mind, and you move into the operating system. Alpha, theta, delta, that's the subconscious system. So beta goes to alpha, alpha goes to theta, theta goes to delta. Beta and alpha are the conscious mind. Alpha, theta, and delta are the subconscious mind. Now check it out. I just want to show you those different brain waves. Delta brain waves, 0.5 to 4 cycles per second, catatonic state. The brain is causing the body to be dreaming and unconscious. Theta brain waves, 4 to 8 cycles per second. Alpha, 8 to 12. Beta, low beta, mid-range beta. Now take a look at high beta. When you're stressed out, your brain goes into hyperdrive. Your brain goes into a super aroused state, and some people spend the majority of their day in these high beta states. High beta is more than 3 times higher than low range beta. And then there's gamma brain waves, and we don't have time to talk about that, but we have plenty of brain scans when people get into these super conscious states, and the whole brain is oscillating at a greater level of order. Brain waves, when you're under stress and you're over-aroused, the different compartments of the brain become subdivided. It becomes compartmentalized, or what's called modulated, as you shift your attention like a lightning storm in the clouds. As you shift your attention to all these different elements in your life, the brain starts firing out of order. When the brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. Go from a narrow focus to a broadened focus. Put your attention on space. Put your attention on nothing. Those different compartments of the brain that were modulated and compartmentalized begin to synchronize. That's when your brain starts functioning in a more holistic state. And that's when you feel more like yourself than you have in a long time. Coherent waves build energy. Incoherent waves lose energy. When the entire brain, all the different parts of the brain with one of those caps on, are functioning in a state of coherence, all the waves are dancing to the same rhythm. When the brain is firing out of order, that's called incoherence, and those waves cancel out. Coherence is health, incoherence is disease. Take 2 waves, bring them together. If they're out of phase and they interact with each other out of phase, that straight line represents they cancel each other out. There's no energy in the brain. Get the heart and the brain in a level of coherence and order. Coherent waves come together and they create bigger waves. The higher the wave, the higher the amplitude. Here's a normal brain activity. Person opens their awareness and they move into this beautiful alpha phased synchronized activity. Here's another one. Without using anything but their mind, sensing space, their entire brain is moving back into order. Coherent brain, very clear intention, strong signal in the field. Another coherent alpha global brainwave state. Last state here, this person's in coherent theta brainwave states. This means that the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is completely open. Now, I've given you a lot of content and information today. We have 2 meditations that we've offered as part of this little course. The generous present moment, which is you laboring for that present moment. That is the first step to change. It's not a long meditation, but I just want you to catch yourself going unconscious. And every time you catch yourself going unconscious, become conscious. Settle your body back into the present moment and return back to that nothing. Keep practicing that. The research shows that if you keep doing that, paying attention and being present is a skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it. The other meditations we've offered are the morning and evening meditations. If you truly want to change from one personality to another personality, it's a gift from us to you. Really simple. It's 20 minutes in the morning for you to review how you don't want to think, how you don't want to act, and how you don't want to feel. And remember so much that you don't forget. Review those states of mind and body so you stay conscious. How do you want to think? How will you think? What is that new belief you want to install in your brain, that new voice in your head? How do you want to behave differently than you typically do with your ex, your coworkers, your kids? Rehearse that in your mind. How do you want to feel today? Trade those limited emotions for elevated emotions and keep feeling them until they become familiar to you. Keep remembering them over and over again so you don't forget. At the end of the day, there's nothing like a good evaluation. How did I do? Unconscious. Who did I react to and why? Okay, if I had another opportunity tomorrow to go out again, how am I going to modify myself even further? What would love do? What would greatness look like? Could I actually forgive? What's the high road? Another day, another lifetime. Who can I be? Think about what you learned from the day before you go to sleep. Just remind yourself of who you're no longer going to be, and remind yourself of who you do want to be. Practice that enough times as an experiment. The experiment is, if my life change. And when the synchronicities and the serendipities and the coincidences begin to appear in your life, and you start realizing at some level that what you're doing inside of you is producing the effect outside of you, I promise you, you're going to believe more that you're the creator of your life and less that you're the victim of your life. I hope all of this is helpful for you. I hope it was worth your time and energy. We have so much compelling research to prove to you that you're greater than you think, more powerful than you know, more unlimited than you could ever dream. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me. I hope the meditations serve you in a wonderful way. Thank you.